Hello, hello. It's Wednesday. It's time to talk to Ricky Williams and our special guest, Jay-Z, who's going to be the moderator for today's episode on race and astrology. So we have no idea what's going to happen because Jay-Z's in charge.
All right, well, we're going for round two. We had round one already. Everybody escaped unscathed. Everybody had a good time and didn't get hurt. And okay, so just to acknowledge that everything that you've done so far in your lives, everything you've learned, everything you've experienced has led you to this very moment. Are
Okay,
you ready, Andy?
I'm ready.
Ricky, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. All right. So last time we were talking about maybe some global themes and we were talking about some mundane astrology themes about uh, just cultural and racial movements in our history. Today we're going to bring it down a little bit more in this episode to the personal, right? And so I wanted to start with a question that goes like this. Uh, have you ever had a client or a student, because you both do readings or conversations and teaching, and but have you had a client or a student whose chart specifically revealed struggles or traumas related to identity? And how did astrology help maybe reframe that for them or help them in some kind of way?
Well, I'm for sure letting Ricky go first.
Really? I thought you would go first.
No way.
Yeah. Um, you know, like when I hear the question, I think that to me, in a sense, all of the problems, all the issues are, in a sense, identity issues. And I think the value of an astrological chart is you're looking at a deeper identity. Um, and so the value has always been to reframe the story. So when I got on the spiritual path, my teacher first introduced me to astrology. She was the swami at the ashram down the road, and she would say, "You're not black. You're not a man." She would say, "You are the atma." She'd say, "You are the soul." And I think when we look at a chart, it has the same kind of effect as we get out of our external identity and we get to a deeper identity, and then we can appreciate that deeper identity is trying to express through the external identity. So I think identity is the main issue for most of the people that I see, and the reframing of connecting someone to a deeper sense of identity, it has been a useful balm for that ailment.
Oh, gotta follow that. No, I'm just kidding. Good answer. Okay. So I'll go a little more technical. So I would say that some charts absolutely do struggle with identity. And I agree with Ricky that the chart is like an interface of your soul extruding through a certain chakric machine, right? And so like that we all have a soul and that is our kind of deepest identity, but some charts have identity struggles, and I'm going to go to the sun because a lot of our identity is sun based. So it's like, if people have like sun square Uranus, that can be cyclical tensions around an ever changing identity. Like RuPaul's an example of this. Like she constantly is changing her identity. Now I'm this, now I'm this character, now I'm this character, and she's found a way to capitalize on that and also be just help humanity with that, right? Like so that it's not necessarily a bad thing to struggle with identity, but I do think there are charts that change identity a lot, like Sun Uranus people. People who are Sun Saturn might struggle with even forming an identity at all or saying that they're even a human with an identity. Like they might just be like, "Oh, excuse me for living." Like I've seen that. I have a student right now who's I'm not divulging who it is or breaking confidentiality, but she's very shy to express or even go on YouTube or things like that because of a Sun Saturn. And it's like that is an identity issue. Like you're almost too humble. You won't allow yourself an identity at all, you know? So I think when it comes down to race and class and things like that, I think you can be born in a body that is, of a certain ethnic background. That's your genetic layer. And whether or not you struggle with that identity has a lot to do with the build of the chart. Some people, are fine with their identity. They're like, yeah, I'm an African American. Oh well, whatever. They just don't. But some people are like, oh, and but that's their soul's job is to wrangle with identity. And so, I could go a little bit longer, but I don't want to be long-winded.
Well, I mean, if you don't mind, I'd like to respond because I think you make some really interesting points. And what I'd add is, I think Sun is gives us information about how important identity is. You know, because if the Sun is strong, identity becomes a key issue in someone's life, and if the Sun is not, like you were saying, it's like, who cares, right? I don't need to, I don't need to be someone, you know. But also, so I think we can like we can measure magnitude by someone's Sun, but I also think of identity, especially in the way that what we're talking about in this podcast, has to be connected to the ascendant, because the ascendant is the vehicle, it's the body. And right, regardless of what my chart says, when I walk into a room, you know, right, or I'm walking by someone in a dark alley, right, that my physical presence, right, which is brings in race, brings in gender, right, is having an effect, direct effect on that person's experience and my experience. And one way, the way my teacher describes the ascendant is, he says it's the stained glass through which the rest of the chart shines into the world. And so it does become a part of identity.
Great. And you can make the case that the whole chart is identity. It's like every piece of the puzzle is one, aggregate to the larger identity. Like why are some astrologers also like not always doing astrology? They're like making beads or like doing like the whole chart forms a kind of cyclical compounding identity as well. You're
Yeah. I also wonder if with race specifically or ethnicity, if there's going to be a predominance of activations connected to the fourth house. I just think of our parents, our ancestry. I'm curious. I wonder because at least in the stories, one of the issues about marrying outside your race or doing right, that the pressure comes from the parents.
hmm. Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Fourth house could totally influence that. Okay, so I'm going to take this conversation a little bit to another direction. So another square I see that deals a lot with identity theoretically is the Taurus Aquarius square. So it's like Taurus is like foundations that are fixed, right? It's like fixed things. And so one of the biggest isms fighter I know is a Moon Mars conjunction in Taurus, and she'll just be like racism, ism. But that's like it's Taurus is like we're foundation, we're fixed. Like isms are fixed. You know what I mean? And it's like if you're like intersections of race and astrology, that's less like fixed. Like racism is like institutional, right? But it's like the square to Aquarius is like we get this like theoretical layer to Taurus of like, like I don't know, like I just see a lot of Taurus Aquarius squares, and a lot of them are teachers and they deal with like redistricting and like theoretics around teaching. And so it's like I do think there are charts that also deal with isms.
All right. Next question then for you, Ricky, because it seems like you've had a couple different, like what other people might see as different identities, although you've been yourself the whole time, right? So have you met with, skepticism that you could be an astrologer because you were a professional sports player or is there any way that astrology kind of like informed your path or that you can explain to people? using astrology?
Yeah, I think that's what astrology is all about. I think it's a map to find your identity. And it's not it's a map, right? In order for a map to work, we have to read the map, but we also have to look to see where we're going. And so I think if we have some kind of map of where we're going internally, it can help us fine tune our guidance system of where we're going externally. And so it's like the more I understood my chart, I had less doubt. I had less I had less doubt about my path because it is an unconventional path, and I have Uranus and trine my 10th house moon and opposing the ruler of my 10th house. So again, once I saw that, I lost the expectation to have a conventional path, and I could take pride in the unconventional path. And it allows me to storytell in a way where even things that don't make sense to other people make perfect sense to me. This makes me think. I was talking to one of my students. He's 17 years old, and we've been working together for several months. And he came on retreat to stay at the yurt, stay on the property, and we were sitting down, and his mom was there. And his mom said, "So, what have you gotten from learning astrology?" And he said, "I feel like it's," and he's not a spiritual person. He's just a kid, right? Taurus rising. He's just like, "I feel like it allows me to see with my third eye." And we don't think about it that way. But the ability to perceive astrological energies is extrasensory perception. We know it because when we talk to our friends that don't know anything about astrology and we say we're talking about Venus, they look at us and they say, "What the hell are you talking about?" Right? We have the ability to perceive things that you cannot perceive with your normal senses. And the astrological chart is like a training mechanism to help us tune into that. So because I look at a chart as like that kind of tuning mechanism. And when I first found astrology, the first impression it made is how far out of tune I was. Right? And that's why I was so miserable. And as soon as I realized that and started just learning more about my chart, I even just learning about astrology, it kept bringing me more and more and more into tune. So I think that's what it's all about, at least for me.
Can I speak to that?
Please.
Take a few notes. So, Ricky's making me think about here that we can actually have a new emergent identity intrinsically. Like, I am now an astrologer. Like, Ricky could start to identify that internally. But then, in order to get the crowd to identify us with that in identity, there's like a whole process that goes on. Like, can he just identify as an astrologer and then be one? Will the crowd accept that identity, or does that even matter? Or does he have to live out the act of being an astrologer? Like part of this show with Ricky is kind of forging an identity for him as an astrologer. Because he kept saying like people keep wanting me for football, and we're like, well, we want you for astrology over here. We want you to forge out your identity here. So like, does it help when the crowd sees you acting out that identity? Does that help or no?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, identity, from my perspective, is our duty is to express the potentials in our chart. And to me, that's the definition of identity. And it's a constant process of stepping more in the shaping and the developing of those potentials. And so, right, I don't have any responsibility to fit some external person's definition of what something means. Right? To me, identity is that they have to see and accept me as who I am, whether they call me a football player or an astrologer. But the reality is, I was a football player, and I now am an astrologer. So to me, identity is what I impress people with, and that's I don't. And words get us a little bit confused. But to me, when I have a conversation with someone, like what I want them to walk away with is, wow, I can tell he's studied. I can tell he's thought about this, and he expresses it in a way that there's some sensitivity. Because if someone is expressing those things, then I know I'm doing a good job of expressing my chart because of the effect that it's having on people. And to me, that is identity.
Okay, can I be like a Socratic guest here?
Please.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask a weird question in order for learning. So like, do you identify as a pot smoker?
Yes. But so when I identify as a pot smoker, the first thing that comes to my mind is I don't have a resistance to that. I know I have Neptune squaring my ascendant, Neptune opposing my midheaven. And I know I have a powerful Neptune. So when I hear a pot smoker, I say that is an expression of my chart that I own.
Interesting. So, because people identify you as that because of your just whatever history, and then you make appearances about it. But I see what you're saying is like that's an integrate part of you, of your identity that you don't buck or mind. Now, is there anything that the crowd identifies with you that you do buck?
I don't, because I can see where it's coming from, and I can appreciate where I can appreciate where it's coming from. So I'm like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that because I see those as all as artful expressions of my potentials.
Yeah. Do you identify as an African American or a black man, or is there what's the identity around that stuff?
I mean, it's not something that I think about, but as I go through my day, it's reflected back to me all the time. Part of my identity. It's part of my perspective. It's part of my history. It's part of what I was made of, and so I talked about one layer of expressing my chart, but the other layer is expressing my genetics, and so as an expression of that then it is part of my identity, but not as a defining as a defining piece, like it gives anyone any fixed information about me. To me, it's just like literally like a shade, a color shade that expresses something in it, and just in the nature of the color.
Well, that's why I asked you that because I actually feel like you're like kind of like I am. Like you identify more with your chart than your skin color. Like no, I'm not saying who because I don't know that, but it's like I feel like some people really identify with their race, and that's part of their chart is to identify with the. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it, but it is part of the aggregate. Like you're saying, it's part of the build, but it's not. You don't
So
lean heavily on that.
So, right, if I think here's another place where identity related to body might become more significant. Someone who has a lot of earth in their chart, because because I think if you have a lot of earth in your chart, race becomes more of a becomes more of an issue. But for me, I have a lot of air in my chart, so right, if I get stuck bogged down by race, it limits the concepts, it limits the places my mind can go. So I think depending on the race, it can be conducive to expressing certain parts of the chart. And I think in that sense, we should probably encourage identifying with those elements. But there's certain places where identifying with those things creates a blockage to the expression of something in our chart. And I think maybe not such a good idea to identify with those things.
It makes me think about Tuesday group yesterday. We were talking about when do identities limit you and when do they liberate you?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, totally. And this makes me think too, it's like when people have perceptions about your identity, like perhaps like they'll be able to go to you as an astrologer because maybe somebody thinks that you will be able to understand them and their identity because of, perceptions that they have about you where they wouldn't be comfortable going to someone who they think would have no idea about their culture or. So, yeah,
Exactly.
maybe for you it would be like gender or queer culture, and maybe for Ricky it'd be like black culture or sports fans or guys, you know?
Mhm. Absolutely.
Have you guys ever had someone come to you and specifically be like, "Oh God, I had this awful reading and they totally didn't understand me, and I don't believe in astrology," or anything like that?
Yeah, I think most decent astrologers have had those experiences. Yeah. I mean, I kind of had one today, but it wasn't based on race or gender. It was more based on that I just been through a lot of shit. So I don't really judge anything, and I don't come to conclusions about a chart. So, and I think anyone who does, they limit what astrology can do. So I have those experiences all the time.
Yeah, I call those like a tattoo cover up. It's like
Yeah.
you got a bad tattoo, and so you're like, someone's like, "Can you fix this chart reading I had?" Yeah, like I had one reading that I denied because she came in lambasting the last astrologer, and when I looked at her chart, I was like, "Oh my God, it's so mean. She's gonna do it to me too." Like I think it was like a Moon Mars Pluto conjunction in Leo or something like that, and I was like, like,
Yeah.
but but yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely have had people come to me where they felt misunderstood by the last astrologer. And I think when you get to a certain level in your career, you get a lot of referrals. So people already know who I am coming in, and they've been told or they've seen me on YouTube before. They know me a little bit. That's one of the reasons for us to show up and talk is so that clients feel like they can really suss out, like, is this person going to be my person? Um, but I think those are really good questions of like with intersections of, identity in astrology or race in astrology is like, is it necessary to have a reader who's the same intersection as you, or can a reader with different intersections do a good job for you? I don't know.
I think it depends on how many questions the astrologer is willing to ask. Um, I had a mentor, and he was masterful at. He's a Gemini. He was masterful at having some background information on most cultures,
Hmm.
and he would always frame what he was saying, right, informed by that culture. And he wasn't always accurate, but he was accurate enough where he brought stuff to the surface. It was like, wow, if right, we wouldn't have known if we didn't have some background information about that culture.
Yeah, Judith Hill's really good at that too. Like she talks a lot about, we were talking about this yesterday in our group too, that like you wouldn't prescribe an exorcism for somebody who's not in exorcism groups. Like I mean, some like religions believe in exorcisms, and some spiritualists would be like, no way on that. But like, yeah, I think you do. It's important to be aware of the culture coming into you with the client. And more than being of the same culture, it's the awareness of it that is probably makes a good astrologer. Which is what we're trying to do in this show is really increase that awareness of that cultural layer. Jay-Z, I wish we could hear about your identity, but you're the moderator. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to have some other episode. All right. Well, have you ever had moments when someone just totally dismissed astrology as not for them, but it was because of their culture or racial background or where they were coming from? And what do you do in that case?
Yeah, I think there's a decent amount of religious people who are taught that, in the Bible, that's some negative things about astrologers. It says positive things about astrology, but it also says negative things about astrology that most people focus on. And so they might say it's from the devil, and I say, okay, cool. I don't know. I don't have the need to ever convince anyone. It's like people find it when they're ready.
I got one for you. It's
Mm.
normies. Like there's like normal traditional guys or whatever who are just like, oh, astrology, well, and it's like, I mean, I always, it's like in normie guy culture, astrology is one of those things that's just, duh, it's not real, duh, it's dumb. You know what I mean? Like they're taught to think it. But I'm trying to think of something equivocal, like or equivalent to that. Astrology is one of the biggest things that normie culture just doesn't want to have anything to do with it. That's why I love queer people, and as far as being an astrologer, I just like like the queer community loves astro because they're like counterculture. You know what I mean? Or like I'm trying to think of other like circus arts people love astro. Anybody who's counterculture is more into it, and the more normally traditional, not.
Because I think what I find where astrology has the most benefit is when someone is going through something very difficult. And normies, right? Part of being normie is you're avoiding going through things that are too difficult, that are specifically difficult. And so because I remember my first wife, like she's open minded, but she wasn't really into astrology, and her attitude was like, Why do you need that?
Oh, interesting. She's like, I'm fine talking about what we're gonna eat for dinner tonight.
Exactly, right? Exactly.
Oh. Like
So
I don't mean to say base. Some people are pretty basic, but they are.
It's true. And I don't think it's a negative thing, right? Right? If we're all different, we all are different flavors and different colors. And they, we call them basic and they call us complex or we have problems, right? That's how she thought. And she loved me, but her idea was you had a rough childhood, you just got problems. Right? I understand why you need that stuff.
maybe we're just too dramatic.
Well, I
Yeah.
do think like Ricky was calling it extrasensory. We notice things, or we're giving language and narrative to tiny nuances that, it's like I don't know, like the colors someone wears and what their aura looks like, and how they feel and what's their vibe and tone and all this stuff. And it's like the normie basic people are just like, what? They're I mean. Yeah, I find it's like, how do they stay interesting to themselves? But yeah, like I love that nuance layer. Like, oh my God, let me dial all the little dials.
Some people don't have the resources to process that much complexity.
See, Ricky's being nice and I'm being mean.
Well, it's true though.
It's true
It's
though.
it's a lot. It's easier just to shut off and try to keep things as simple as possible than have to always be thinking about the problems of the world. You know,
Yeah.
I totally get it. I get
Well,
it.
yeah, and as a lot of charts are not into astrology. That's the chart that's not supposed to be into astrology. Like my dad's an infrared astrophysicist, and he's a Capricorn Gemini. He's just his chart just doesn't resonate with the philosophical level of it. He's more into like
There you go.
physical layer of this star. And if we were all attuned to this same layer, we would all be the same, and that would be boring. So, you know.
Exactly. As long as we can communicate with each other, right? Then we get to benefit from their perspective and they get to benefit from ours. And I think that's the beauty of Venus, right? If we find people that we connect with or on the same vibration, we can share our different qualities and our gifts with each other in ways that enrich everyone.
Yeah, to answer your question directly, Jay-Z, it's never been cultural, which keeps people from astrology. It's been the complexity of astrology that keeps people away from it. And in the ancient times, they knew this. They would say you're supposed to learn everything and then take a hand at astrology. So after you learn math and science and anthropology and all these things, then go for it. What I love doing is like bending the notes of people who are almost into it. Like my producer Billy, he's an anthropology guy. He's a metalhead anthropology guy, but he's totally a sapio person. Like he's very, very smart, right? But like he'll take the normie approach, and I'll be like, no. He'll be like, well, she's in menopause, and that's why she's mean. I'm like, and her chart is mean. I saw it. Like, but like I'll bend his note a little bit over and over again, and we've been at this for 12 years, And but he's not an astrologer, and I don't want a producer who's an astrologer. I want somebody who will take me as high as I want to go in show business. That I'm not. I don't care if he's an astrologer or not, but I always just bend the cord. I never just let him just sit there. But he loves it, but he never will be an astrologer himself.
Maybe it's self-selecting too, the people whose charts you see. I guess, well, it could be different. Like, so your producer, you've looked at his chart because he's a person in your life. Or Ricky, you've looked at the charts of people in your family, and because they're in your family and in your life, right? But the people who specifically come to you for astrological advice, is it usually that they have a chart that shows that they would be interested, or they're in like some crazy transit that's causing them a lot of energetic turmoil?
Yeah, that's a good question. I find a lot of times it's a chart that's into astrology that could be really into that could get a lot from astrology.
Hmm.
I find that probably 90 or more percent of the time.
Yeah, I agree with Ricky. But you're totally right. A lot of times they go through a transit where they get really into astrology, and it's like it'll be like Uranus hits their Mercury, or something more, or like Uranus goes to their ninth house, or something where there's like a learning of higher religion and philosophy. Then they kind of all of a sudden take to astrology. Like I saw something the other day that said something like our environment depends on our susceptibility to that environment. And it's like you can put astrology in front of the same person for like 10 years and then they have the transit that becomes susceptible to learning it and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh my God, shiny astrology." It's like so it is like when do they take to it? And then the other thing is sometimes I have a friend like right now I have this one person who's a hub of sending me like 10 charts because she's really into astrology, so she keeps sending all her friends and it's like that becomes like a cultural layer of like this this girl is creating a culture of astrology among her pod and that's sending them over. So sometimes it's their chart, sometimes it's the culture they're in.
Oh, interesting. Does she have a lot of Aquarius in her chart?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I probably couldn't divulge that anyway.
Yeah, yeah, 11th house or something. Well, this brings me to my next question, and that is, so we've been talking about like identity as regards to culture and race and gender, right? And what do you guys think about with like Pluto going in Aquarius, right? uh, Transhumanism as the next cultural boundary of like interacting and accepting AI and machinery as part of a human body or human condition, and how futurism might change humans and the way they think about each themselves. What do you think?
So
Yeah,
is
you go first. You go first this time.
okay, cool. Is transhumanism going beyond being human? Is that what it means?
Yeah, let's yeah, I think I might have used the word, it might be a term like that has a certain definition, but I didn't really mean it as any definition like that.
Okay. So, but you're talking about like the integration of computers with humans and like how is that? I had a girlfriend once who was like, I'm transitioning into an interdimensional space apparition, and it makes me think of that. I'm like, well, what are your pronouns? I'll call you by the right noun, whatever it is. Like, I don't know, but I see what you're saying. I love that because I think you're right. Like, if an AI writes a book for you. Did you really write that book, or is it you, or is it the computer? Is that And so I think obviously there's no answer to that, but in identity politics, which is what we're looking at, is the politics around identity and how we live. I can see where that's the next wave because we have conquered a lot. I think we've integrated a lot of people. People of all genders are getting married. There's a lot of integration that's gone on. And so now the next question with Pluto and Aquarius would be now how do we integrate with computers? And how does your identity dance with the computers? How much do you let it into you? How much do you not? Like, and I can see, and then there's all the people who with body modifications who are kind of transhumanist, where they are becoming like animals, or like the Human Alien Project, or I think the body modification generations have kind of started that of like I'm this other thing, so um I love that. I mean, I guess there's no answer to that other than like, wow, what a great can of worms you just opened.
Oh, Zempic. No,
What's Ozempic?
exactly. So people don't look at it. People don't tend, or I don't see people tending to think about pharmaceuticals as technology, they but they are. It's a form of technology.
Hmm.
Just when you're talking about body modification, and science and with artificial intelligence, it's going to take that to the next level. So for me, I think Pluto always brings difficult questions. It brings progress, but the progress comes from the difficult question. The progress is what brings the difficult questions, and how we answer the difficult questions determines whether that progress destroys us or takes us to another level. So I think there's questions about what is a human, you know, and I think right, what is a human separate from what is a computer, and I think we're going to be able to get much closer to answering that question because a lot of our training in history, especially for the lower classes, been trained to be the computers. They get trained to do all the labor, but as we find machines to be able to do that, it allows humans to embrace different identities that maybe they haven't had access to before.
Well, I think, as spiritualists, we can take it down to the soul seed level and be like, well, how you engage the machine has so much to do with what your soul and what it's susceptible to. It's like, if, let's say my chart has nothing in Aquarius, which mine doesn't, like I'm just not susceptible to AI. I like don't have any interest in it. I mean, I don't take to it. I'm like, AI, I don't go shiny there, So it's like I think some charts are going to be like shiny, shiny, computer, shiny, like, and they're going to go all after it. And we would say that's what their soul is set out to do. Like they're taking parts in the fate of this computing transhumanism wave, and so some people's identities will be altered by this a lot, and some charts will not, depending on how much they're susceptible to that. And I say susceptible in a positive way, but like how much they notice AI and engage it.
Well, I think it's going to affect everyone. But you're right. As Pluto has just entered Aquarius, there are certain people that were primed for it, more easily impressed by it, and they're the ones that are the techies, the ones that are already way ahead of it. But I think by the time Pluto leaves Aquarius, it's going to find a way to touch all of us and affect us.
That's true. It'll hit everyone by either like a sextile trine or square to Mars or like whatever it does in your chart. Like it will hit
Yeah,
something by the time it leaves.
yeah. So I have the sun at 0 degrees, 0 degrees Gemini. So as soon as Pluto enters Aquarius, it's making a trine to my sun. So it's like got me, got me.
And you've been writing the app.
Exactly. And that's what I was working on this weekend. It was fascinating. So my teacher Steve came up for the weekend, and his claim to fame, and it's really powerful, is turning a South Node configuration into a story, into a narrative. And we're trying to train AI to be able to create, because AI can, I mean, ChatGPT can create stories. So we're working on how to organize and pass in the astrological and how to frame the astrological information into the ChatGPT where it can spit out really meaningful stories for people. It was fast, it was mind blowing. And it was really, Steve's in his mid 70s, and it was his first time interacting with artificial intelligence. And he picked it up so quickly that in a course of 2 or 3 days, he was really able to train the model in his system. It's cool. It's cool to experience.
Wow. Stephen Forrest really is a genius.
He's got Mars at 0 degrees or 1 degree Pluto. I mean, 1 degree Aquarius. So the Plutos can jump that.
Oh
Plutos
my
can
God.
jump that Mars. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Andy, you're right. It's like it's gonna affect everybody, but some people are gonna notice it affecting them and some people are not. But it is gonna affect everybody because it's it, because as humans we rebaseline and accept things really easily, you know? And like Ricky was saying, like, yeah, you can have a drug that totally alters what your body looks like. You can have surgery that totally alters what your body looks like. You can implant something that changes the function of your body. Like, you know, if you used to have to inject yourself with insulin and now you can get an insulin pump, or you can get a slowly dissolving pill that's implanted in you, or you can put a tracker in your dog, or, you know, you'll be able to put a tracker in your elderly parent. You know, like it's all these things are just gonna like slowly, slowly get accepted. And as we learn to use them, like I just helped my mom who's in her 80s set up a webcam so we can FaceTime, you know, and she did it herself. That just never would have happened before. And then, but then you know, she's got augmented reality in her car if she has like a windshield that's projecting her speedometer onto it. You know, like we are becoming really tightly integrated with the machines that we're creating.
Hmm. It is interesting from the intersections of race and astrology question is like how much is that going to change the cultural layer that we're dealing with? Like if people of any culture, depending on their chart, can access AI and they it's like anyone like talk about the strongest guys. So sometimes when I go on my schizophrenic like who's scary, I'm like, oh my God, the tech guys are the scariest because they can like blow you up with a satellite from my dad's like the scariest because he like builds huge telescopes that fly above the I was like, if he was pissed at me, he could just send out a freaking liquid nitrogen ray. Like, I don't know. But like, so the point is like the tech guys are actually the scariest. They have the biggest muscles. And so it's like, I don't know if, if it seeps into all cultures, does that equalize things or does it, what is it, what does that do to the race layer? That's a good, interesting question too.
Well, I think it becomes another tool to express race.
Hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is music. Music is a form of expressing culture. Fashion is a way of expressing culture. And I think as more people have access to technology, then technology will become a way of expressing culture. So I think of me learning to code, right? And with AI, more people will have access to being able to to create technology. And so a population that hasn't always had access to tech starts to get access to it, what they're going to create is different. My students, because I'm creating astrological technology for my students, I'm trying to train them to think more technologically, to think more, oh, it'd be really cool if I could do this, or if I had this, it'd be really cool, or if we could do this, it'd be really cool. And I said, share those ideas with me. And and I think as we have more tools to express technologically, we're going to see different expressions of culture and race.
That's such a good point. Just like what if you take the same metal chord progression and you drop it into Iceland into a pack of like Iceland metal dudes, it's like you'll get a different song because the culture on that progression. And then you drop it into like Southern Louisiana and the metal dudes down there are going to produce a different song with that progression. I think we could look at AI the same way. It's like we drop it into Louisiana black culture. What are they going to do with AI? And then what are like white guys in New York going to do with AI? Like, it's what are you going to do with AI is the question. And Ricky's making a really good point is like each culture will use that differently. That's going to be interesting to watch.
Interesting. That makes me think also about like responsible AI, right? Because it also can be used irresponsibly, and there could be like differences in access to the tools, even, depending on your class or where you live or, how much money you have. If you have a lot of money, you can use a better AI than if you have to use the one that's ad supported and getting all of your data out of it. I think there will be a lot of um, a lot of things questions that are complex questions that it's going to raise as well.
Interesting. Like if we look at the racism layer where there's inequities between races, like we would say that, if there's any financial inequities, then that will be reflected in the AI layer as well. Like you're saying, like the lower income communities will get the more base AI and then the
So
higher.
is there anything positive that potentially could come from that? So one of the things I noticed when I was in Jamaica is how resourceful the people were. It's like the things they would come up with, I was like, whoa. And it was stark. And I mentioned to someone in Patois, they said, right, when you don't got much, you got to figure out how to make it work, you know? And I was downstairs this weekend with my coding partner, and my laptop, my 3-year-old like plucked off my arrow key and my screen doesn't work, you know. But I found a way to make it work, and I'm typing away and he walked over and he was like, we just got to get you a new laptop. And I mean, that's more socioeconomic, but it's also tied to race. And we say like disadvantage, But a lot of times, people that are advantaged, when they're in a difficult situation, it's like they fall apart. They freak out. Like when I watch all the white men, normie podcasts, they just talk about problems the whole time. Like, doesn't it occur to them to think about like what you can do about the problems? So I think this is one of the things that they teach in schools about appreciating racial or cultural value is we can talk about the negative stuff, but if they survived it and they're still alive, it means they figured something out, right? That could be valuable to other people. And I think because of the history of slavery, I think one of the cultural values of being African American is that we're resilient.
Yeah. Snap.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking of that same word, Ricky, resilience, right? It when you have a resilient, like that's more important than having even resources, is having resilience.
Yes, it's a resource. It's a valuable resource that sometimes when we have external resources, we don't get to develop. Right? And then we have Uranus activating our second house ruler, and right, we don't know how to deal with it.
Interesting.
Oh, well, and then what you're saying is also reminding me of like what sometimes astrologers say about people's charts. Like, Andy, I know you've at times said like, "Oh, their chart is too easy."
Really?
Yeah, or like that people who have difficult charts uh become more interesting.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know that any chart's too easy, but people are always afraid of a difficult chart, and I'm like, those are some dynamic people. They really do express great ebbs and flows.
Yeah, no, and I know it's not you about who said this one, but I did like was speaking with another astrologer who was like who was disparaging of people with easy charts.
Oh yeah. Is that because you have an easy chart that you heard that?
I don't know. I think he was referring to me.
Does he has like a double kite? Like I don't know what you have, but he does have a very but you got some good challenges in life. It's not like yeah. You're not
Yeah.
drab glorious. No way.
Yeah, my chart comes with a soundtrack of angels singing.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Pisces sun in the 12th house, so you do the math.
Well, well, that was kind of my questions, guys.
Good job, JZ. Thank you so much for doing this. Do you have anything on your mind, Mr. Williams?
No, this was great.
Dr. Williams is what I meant to say.
This was great.
So Ricky, this month I have us have guests booked out until April 2nd. So if you are going to be traveling, just let me know early as you know so I can reschedule the guest
Okay, I'm traveling on Wednesday. I'm traveling to Hawaii next Wednesday.
next Wednesday. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll reschedule with someone who's going to be really bummed. No, I don't know. I don't know who they are. I have to look at my schedule. Okay. But yeah, Jeezy, thank you so much for doing this. You're a great moderator and great question asker.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
I
Thanks
love
for the
all your
kind though.
identities. So, all
Yeah.
right, what do you guys think of my outfit? Is it appealing or appalling?
That's nice. I like it.
Okay, cool.
It's very Scorpio.
Yeah, it's like I don't know, black and white stripes are just my jam. I just love them, but this one's kind of weird because it's like half and half. I guess what I don't like about it is like the balloony sleeves, but it's fine.
You can taper those.
It's a good call. I should actually take the time to taper those. Tailor your life.
Well, I think it's more interesting than if it was just a regular, shirt style.
I like it when I do that. Oh. I'm just a little too, not as girly as this shirt, maybe. I don't know.
Venus
I
transit.
need a man's shirt.
Yeah.
All right, you guys will have a wonderful week, and I'll see you in 2 weeks, Ricky.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.